Good evening, everyone across Australia. This is the College of Law Admission to Practice Academy 2020, and we have a stellar lineup for you. My name is Ann-Maree David. I'm the Executive Director of the College of Law in Queensland, and we have guests from across the country and beyond, and they're going to talk to us about their unconventional careers in law this evening. Welcome to the hundreds of participants we know are out there watching this webinar. We encourage you to listen along and play along. Submit your questions via the chat function, and we will pose those questions on your behalf to our panel. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our unconventional lawyers this evening. May I start with introducing John Kenny. John is a lawyer of some 35 years or more standing. He is an unconventional lawyer in that he has pursued intellectual property well ahead of the market, and he is instrumental, if you'll excuse the pun, in the Australian music industry. We'll be hearing from John a little bit later. I'd like to introduce Lucy Dickens. Lucy Dickens is a lawyer from Perth, Australia, and she does law differently. She not only practices law, but she is teaching lawyers how to transform their legal practice and their law firms. Welcome, Lucy. We look forward to hearing about the future of law from you. And then last but not least at all, Milan Gandhi. Milan is a Sydney-based lawyer. You may know him better as the founder of The Legal Forecast, a not-for-profit think tank. He is also a construction litigator and in his spare time, an innovation ambassador. So another very interesting career, and we understand there's more to come. So hopefully Milan will give us some insights into what else he's doing with his career from this point on. Now, without prompting you too much, remember you can ask questions at any time via the chat function. We do love to hear from our audience, so please don't be shy. Let me start the ball rolling this evening by asking John Kenny. John, you're all the way over in Norfolk Island, but you were practicing in Australia for a very long time. How did you start your career off?
Well, when you kicked off in the 70s, we weren't too focused on careerism in those days. We just fell out of law school and took the opportunities that arose. So it took some time. I mean, I graduated in 1975. The Family Law Act came in 1975 and gave an absolute avalanche of family law work. So I learnt litigation techniques and negotiation in that sector. The serendipitous nature of my career started with no connection with the music industry, but a thought leader in the music industry, a fellow called Sebastian Chase, who has remained one of the most innovative practitioners of the distribution of music. He started managing acts when I met him. At one stage, he managed Cold Chisel, Rose Tattoo, and Dragon. So that was pretty much the late 70s in Sydney's music industry, and he was the first manager to use lawyers, which was luckily me. So that led to intellectual property. That led to postgraduate work overseas. When I came back, the bands that I was working for broke up and I had to move on, and I moved to Queensland. And that I landed in the right place at the right time, because Brisbane in the 80s was an aspirational city trying a whole bunch of new things, the Commonwealth Games. I originally came to Brisbane as part of an attempt to be included in the Commonwealth Games athletic squad. I was a hurdler in those days. If you're in Brisbane, within 4 years of the Commonwealth Games, we had Expo. So just to be alive and in Brisbane and going to work in those extraordinary years in Brisbane was an exposure to all the things that were to follow. And in those changes, I found a career.
So, John, you did spend some time cutting your teeth in general practice. I expect that stood you in good stead for what came afterwards.
Yeah, I had no idea that the law would go in the direction it's gone now, where specialties and the tierings, I didn't understand any of that. I worked in third-tier firms for sole practitioners. And then I took advantage of free master's degrees that were available through Malcolm Fraser at the time in the mid-70s, no longer paying for fees. We just enjoyed Whitlam's free university exposure at undergrad level, and now we were tumbling into postgraduate degrees for free. So I jumped on that, and then when the music industry stuff took off, there was nobody teaching intellectual property in undergraduate course. I think Gummo, who was on the High Court, was teaching at Sydney University. I missed all that. I didn't even know what intellectual property was until I started dealing with recording contracts. So it's all about being in the right place at the right time. I feel that I was in the right place in Sydney in the mid-70s to deal with the music industry as it was. And then Brisbane in the 80s was the right place at the right time. I'm not sure that Norfolk Island's the right place at the right time because I'm at the end of my career. But the big issue that I've got to pass on to our new graduates is that the tenor of the times and the city in which you live determine the kind of law you practice. So you've got to be aware of what's happening around you and where the opportunities are in law. We've just spoken to Milan this afternoon, who's taking his expertise in innovation and translating that to an industry function where he'll be a corporate lawyer. These are the opportunities that come along when you least expect them. So you mightn't think that all these things are possible. They certainly weren't planned, but they happen if you put yourself in the way of activity and enterprise.
Now tell me, how can a young lawyer starting out today do that? How did you start networking, John? I know you say it's serendipitous, but you must be one hell of a networker to be able to connect with the right people at the right time.
Well, networking was a whole lot more pressing the flesh in the 80s than it was now. Everything's done digitally, and I'm a pre-digital baby boomer, so I struggle with all of that. For me, it was endless functions in Brisbane as there were at the time in the 80s. So I had to relatively on my own. I didn't have big staffs. You know, I'd learned to work a room. That built up to the biggest professional gatherings I've ever attended, are the trademark conferences overseas in America, where they have 10,000 people who attend. So they have parties with 5,000 lawyers and trademark attorneys. I've actually went to one party on an aircraft carrier. So in those days, it was necessary to know how to work a room on your own, how to deal with the people that were in the room and see where you had common ground. And that stood me in good stead when I went to all these trademark conferences. So what I sensed is that things were changing. They were changing in the music industry. Brisbane in the 80s was one of the first states to work out that innovation had to be a government policy. So with our soon-to-be Premier, Mike Ahern, he was talking about intellectual property as things that the businesses of Queensland should pursue. That makes it easier to practice in an area where the Premier is talking about it on a daily basis. So it's about understanding the zeitgeist of where you are. I can imagine there's colleagues in Perth, which has its own distinctive understanding of mining and all that wonderful resource law that's going on over there. And Milan's about to follow an opportunity to Melbourne. So each of the capital cities, if you are practicing in the city, will have themes and energies. It's the obligation, if you want to have your finger on the pulse, to find those and to network and to find out what's going on and how you can be a part of it.
And John, I think you've taken that network one step further. Didn't you initiate the multidisciplinary practice model in Queensland, I think? Well,
what my new graduates are going to inherit is a place where the law, and I'd be interested to hear Milan's response to this, the law is no longer the primary transactor anymore. We're not the people who determine how things go anymore. We're lucky to be at the table. There's a new governance. We've got artificial intelligence. We've got a whole bunch of things, which means traditional, conventional contracting and so forth is by the by. We have new electronic contracts now called smart contracts, which is linked with Bitcoin, which is linked with blockchain. Artificial intelligence and technology have completely transformed the legal profession. I'm sure Lucy's going to elucidate more on that. So 30 years ago, I felt that to address an opportunity on your own was not going to. I didn't do tax. I'm not a patent attorney. I didn't write business models. I didn't do brands. So I put networks together, which I branded at the time. The principal one is TM5, that had 5 practitioners, and we were the first multidisciplinary firm to address intellectual property opportunities. We were co-authors of the first text by IP Australia about the commercialisation of intellectual property. So I could turn up at IP Australia with all the peripheral issues: tax, valuation, balance sheet treatment of intellectual property, all the things that I didn't do. I developed relationships with those who did. So I'd never be caught short in having a comprehensive offering. So this enabled me to distinguish my offering ahead of my time. We developed some models for joint ventures in intellectual property. And at one stage, IP Australia sent me to a WIPO conference in Manila in the Philippines to present these models as a startup project model on a worldwide level. So not just a model that we could use in Australia, but these 5 contributions could be used around the world. So that was an exciting time. It didn't quite come off. This is all before the internet, but I felt at the time Australia was certainly at the cutting edge, and for a moment I was part of all that.
Fantastic. And John, I know
it was fantastic.
Throughout your career, you've been an incredible supporter of new talent. You've, I know, engaged and employed many hundreds of law graduates and junior lawyers in your time.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to a topic now which I've been told to be careful about, but that's one of the challenges the profession has is generation. So there's 3 generations on the field practicing law. There's us relics at the end of our careers, the baby boomers who have ran the game for, say, 40 years. There's the hard workers in the middle now, those between 30 and 50, who have the family responsibilities and they run firms. And then we have this extraordinary explosion of talent and iconoclastic thought and irrepressible enthusiasm that are sub 30, so what we might loosely call the millennials, who have invented whole new forms of law firms without going through the conventional period that I went through. So I didn't feel I was ready to set up a law firm until I'd been a lawyer for 10 years and I had 2 master's degrees. But there are kids coming out of law school now. Legal Vision is an example of that. Lucy would have more, who are setting up new forms of law firms and making their offering completely digital. And I mean, so the law is undergoing an amazing transformation based on IT. And that's all sadly denied me, but my generational exchange, my offer to young lawyers is that you can come and work with me, and I can't type, so I dictate agreements and letters and work the phones. And there's a young undergraduate lawyer in my room. I have a different one each day, and they keep me digitally connected, and then they get to see the deals that are happening on my screen and run the deals for me because I'm digitally incompetent. So that's what I regard as a generational exchange. I'm at the end of my career. There are some skills that you will need from the boomers. You're doing remarkably well. The millennials, the profession you're about to enter as young practitioners is at its most exciting ebb than it's ever been before. What's possible for young lawyers now far and away exceeds anything that I've experienced and when I was your age. So it was about getting a job and behaving yourself and being taught to do things. You can do that still now if you want to, but there's a whole bunch of other ways you can go, and you'll learn that when you get out and start applying for jobs. So it's a very exciting environment in which young lawyers are coming out now, Ann-Maree.
And I think you're a wonderful exemplar of throwing caution to the wind and also trying to break down those silos, John, where we've come out of law school where we really just mingled with each other, with our fellow lawyers.
Absolutely.
Coming out into the real world
Yep.
and finding all those avenues that you've chased down is certainly a career option for everyone.
Absolutely. And I want everyone to have, all the new graduates to be confident in your own abilities. If you've passed a law degree, and probably others on the way to that law degree, you're intellectually equipped. If you're a young person, you've grown up with a keyboard for the last 15 years. And so with that keyboard and with these opportunities, your careers are going to be international immediately. It'd be wonderful for you. It's as long as you recognise that the lawyers don't call the shots anymore on our own. We are part of teams, and the trick is to learn to project manage complementary contributions from different professions. And that's a skill that I've had to acquire, because some of the, when I first started, accountants and lawyers weren't necessarily the best of friends. Well, they are now. For a period there, as Ann-Maree will remember, law firms were being bought by accountants. That didn't continue, but the accountants had, at the first tier level at least, had a time of really leading lawyers and teaching us what's going on. I think the most innovative professional environments in Australia now are the first tier accounting firms. The things they're doing far and away exceed what even the first tier lawyers are doing. So I'm taking my lessons from the accountancy profession at the top end, who are now looking at a whole range of markets that they traditionally weren't interested in. So they're looking at the markets that I practice in, and I need to have dialogue with them. And currently I'm being inspired by them.
Our horizons have certainly broadened, John.
They have.
We might use that as our segue now to introduce Lucy Dickens, John. Lucy is...
Thank you.
No, I think we'll be back to you shortly, John. Lucy Dickens, as I say, is a lawyer, but she's also a business coach. Now, Lucy has actually used the tag doing law differently in her business coaching. She is a budding author. She's a podcaster, and she's literally transforming the practice of law. Lucy, tell us about a day in the life of Lucy Dickens.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? As you mentioned at the beginning about asking us to introduce ourselves and tell a bit about what we do, I wear quite a few different hats. So maybe I'll just kind of give a summary. So yes, I do host the Doing Law Differently podcast, which is a weekly podcast where I interview who I call leaders in law. And I'm looking at really the behind the scenes of law firms, and we're having conversations about how these lawyers and law firms are changing the practice of law. And I really do have a focus on the practical, what are you doing and how are you doing it, as opposed to sort of the why, which is the other side that I think we talk about a lot more. Yes, as part of the Doing Law Differently kind of brand, I suppose, I do business coaching, and I'm writing a book that's all about how small law firms or leaders of small law firms can transform their business to make them more efficient and more effective, and ultimately to give them back time for other things in life that are priorities as well as working. So that's one of the hats that I wear. I'm also a senior associate at a small firm in Perth called Birman, where I've worked for 10 years. My role there is mainly in business development. So I get to have all sorts of fun trying out all the crazy ideas that I come up with, some of which are not quite so crazy and work, and some maybe don't. But it's a really, really great and varied role where I basically get to just try things differently in terms of the practice of law and the way we deliver our services, the way we market our services, the way we manage our team, the way we do performance reviews, anything that relates to law firm practice management. We're trying all sorts of different things to kind of keep it fun and interesting. And then I guess the third one is that I am involved in the development of practice management software, which is developed by our law firm or by an entity related to our law firm. And I have been heavily involved in the design of that technology for the last 10 years or so.
And Lucy, I dare say you can't do any of those. You can't wear any of those hats without being a lawyer first and foremost. So you are still practicing law?
I am still practicing law. I do still have a practicing certificate. these days, most of the practice of law I do is in supervision. So I'm heavily involved in our training program and in supervising our junior lawyers with their client files. And then I just kind of pick and choose the files that I think look like fun, and then I take those for myself. Just being honest. But no, I definitely do still practice. And I think that's one of the things that, having a practicing certificate isn't actually essential, I don't think, to a lot of the work that goes on inside a law firm. But for me, I think in the work I do, it really is, because if I'm improving a process or I'm looking at the way a service is delivered, I like to get in there and do it myself first, really understand the law, understand the ideas, understand the concepts, understand what the legal position is. And then from there, I will then look at how I can make the service different or better.
Mm. And Lucy, tell me, think back to when you were, say, in third or fourth year of your law degree. Did you think, well, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to be a practitioner and I'm going to be a litigator or a transactional lawyer? Did you have those aspirations? Not at all. You were a different lawyer back then.
I didn't really know. I think, like a lot of people who do law at university, I kind of did it because it was suggested to me as the next step. I enjoyed politics and law, or whatever that subject is, at high school, and I wasn't really into science, so kind of law was the next step, but I didn't really know what that was going to look like.
And so you came through, you graduated, you were admitted. How many years down the track were you actually practicing when you said, hold on a minute, I think we can do this differently?
Before I had a practicing certificate.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I started my career in the firm that I'm still at today. I've been there for just over 10 years. I worked part-time as the position was a legal executive, so effectively a law clerk while I was studying law. I started in my third year of my degree. And within the first year of that position, we had developed a fixed price flat rate conveyancing product, which at the time was quite revolutionary. We were the only people in Western Australia to offer conveyancing on a fixed fee flat rate basis. So pretty much right from then, because what happened was that conveyancing was my job, and all of a sudden we had a massive increase in workload, and it was work I didn't really enjoy. So I straight away had to work out, how am I going to change this so that I don't have to do the stuff that I don't enjoy anymore? And for me, that meant process improvement, creating templates, educating our clients, working with the technology developer to try and automate a lot of the stuff that I didn't enjoy. And so all of that started within my first year in a law firm.
Now, Lucy, if you were to meet yourself today and you were heading inside a very conservative, very traditional law firm where they've not heard yet of the sandbox idea of, having a go, fail fast and fail often, how would you suggest to Lucy Dickens now, this is how you'd approach your employers about maybe doing things differently? How would you sell that idea? Because I think we've got a lot of creative and a lot of collaborative young lawyers coming through, but they may not be able to make them leave their mark yet, because a lot of the profession is still so conservative.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and quite a hard one to answer, because I guess it depends a lot on the context as well. But I think I'd look for some low-hanging fruit and look for something where we could make a change that might be a small change, but that would have a big impact. Or perhaps it's just one file. If it's fixed fee, for example, doing that on one file and then reporting back and demonstrating how that worked, or perhaps even what didn't work, so that it's clear that you're not just trying to implement this idea, but you're actually interested in analysing whether this is good for the business. So probably starting small would be my advice.
And probably being brave.
Yeah, being brave. And just having a go. Like I said, when I started, I come in I work in the office 3 days a week. Almost every day I go in and we have lunch together, and I say, so this is the new idea that I've come up with overnight. But it's just having the conversation. I mean, you don't have to implement all of the ideas, but you need to spark the conversation and get the conversation going. So I think not being afraid to question the way things are done and to speak up and share your thoughts, even if they are out of the ordinary.
Mm. Lucy, you've just mentioned that you're working 3 days a week, which again, even today is unconventional. How do you broach that topic? And what are you doing with the other 2 days a week that we are all working?
Well, technically I'm employed 4 days a week in the firm. I do 3 days in the office and I do 1 day just throughout the rest of the week. I don't have fixed hours for the rest of that. On the other 2 days, Tuesday and Thursday, I have two children, so I'm with my children. They're aged 4 and 1, so I spend those days with them. What was the other part of your question? How do we broach that topic? Yeah, I am at a firm that is very, very flexible, open-minded, and my boss is an amazing person, and he always has recognized that the people who are on our team are humans and that they have other things going on in their lives, and he doesn't expect anybody to be a superhero. I mean, the other week I'd started at 4 o'clock and I was lecturing for the College of Law actually during the day for a couple of hours in the middle, and it hit 2 o'clock and I had nothing left to give. I was absolutely shattered. Technically I was supposed to be working till 5, but he looked at me and he said, "You're no good to anybody here. You just need to go home and get some rest." So I am lucky in that I have found myself in a very supportive place. In terms of how to bring up the conversation though, I would say, I guess the same answer as what I gave you about making changes in the profession. I mean, this is really the same thing, isn't it? If you're implementing a fixed price or if you're trying to get flexible work up and running, it's small steps, and it's being able to demonstrate that you can still manage your clients and meet all the work, complete the workload and meet everybody's expectations. You just do it in a bit of a different way. I mean, coronavirus has proven that to a lot of firms, I think. At least I would hope, especially those who have been forced to allow their staff to work remotely and flexibly.
That's a good point. And Lucy, I'm going to dare you now to tell me, what does the future of law look like? Once you've transformed everything we do, what's left? What do we lawyers do? Do we all join John Kenny in the music industry? Where do we go?
Oh, I reckon some of us might. Maybe not. I'm not that kind of creative, artistically creative. But we're not going to be out of a job, because like I said, you don't need a practicing certificate to do a lot of the things that I do in my job or that our staff do in their jobs. But we do need people who understand the practice of law, and that's not going away. Of course, there's artificial intelligence and technology John's spoken about, and I've used a lot of new technologies in our firm to eliminate the need for me to do a lot of the work. But where I'm still needed is that human element, the being able to relate to a person and to have that conversation and to understand feelings and to really bring that human element along with the practical, legal and other skills.
And that's not just individual clients, is it, Lucy? It's corporate lawyers as well, or corporate clients, and the companies and corporations they lead. You treat them as humans because that's who's leading them.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Lucy, thank you. I think we'll segue now on to Milan Gandhi, and we'll come back to you with some questions from the group. So welcome, Milan. And can I share with everyone that it's Milan's birthday today, so he's here with us instead of out having cake somewhere. Thank you so much, Philip.
It's a privilege. I'm really enjoying listening, actually. It's it's really interesting to hear about the other panelists' journey. So I'm spending it well. So thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's fabulous. So I mentioned at the outset that you're a Sydney-based lawyer, although I know you from Queensland, when you were founding the Legal Forecast. Can you tell us, you were a law student at that point, what on earth suggested to you that you had time, apart from your study, to go and create something as wonderful as the Legal Forecast?
Well, thanks, Ann-Maree. I think, it's interesting that you asked that question, because I often got the criticism back then from some very bright colleagues who are continuing to do some extraordinary things today in sort of the more traditional legal avenues, that, I was crazy, that I needed to just get into the Law Society, be the president for a year, get all good grades and high distinctions, and, go over to some prestigious black letter institution in England, and that was really the pathway. And I didn't believe them, and I think it was probably sourced in the fact that I'd come from film. So I had been working as a music video director and had graduated film school and that was really my passion. And I came to UQ Law with this kind of dream that, look, all I need to do is just get out of here with a way of paying myself or having enough security so I can write screenplays for a living and get that career off the ground. But what ended up happening was I truly enjoyed what I found in law school, and then there was this transformation that occurred. But the thing about the legal forecast is I saw myself having come from film, and it's not necessarily correct to see yourself like this, but I decided for some reason or another that I was an outsider, and so I immediately felt that that there was some important work to be done to rally together people who may think a little differently, or who at that time thought a little differently about what we were there to do. And that sort of snowballed into this bigger project about looking at the future of law and trying to move beyond the walls of our classroom to investigate, well, what will this look like in the future, and how do we reimagine legal services? Because there's obviously an impetus to do that in terms of the justice gap and some other big problems. And initially, in those days, we saw technology as the real panacea, although we wisened up a bit and we realized it's about a lot more than just technology. But and that continues to sort of be the mandate of the legal forecast today, which is all over the country, as you know.
Absolutely. And you're still involved in the legal forecast, Milan?
That's right. So I'm still on the board of the legal forecast, and a lot of the real creative work is now done by some bright people, including I'll give a shout out to Vertica, who's an attendee today. So we have a really brilliant generation of new leaders in the legal forecast, many of whom are known to you, Ann-Maree, who in the various state chapters all over the country are producing ideas at that intersection of law, innovation, and typically our projects are events, in-person events, but we've pivoted recently with COVID, and we've run some mentoring initiatives that try and assist students who are interested in doing things differently from the get-go to partner with other people in the field like themselves in terms of what they ultimately hope to do. So that's been great, and we've also run some seminars that try and target legal innovators in different countries. So we thought that could be a useful thing to give back to the subscribership, trying to get some perspectives from abroad about how our colleagues in other countries are doing innovation. So it's been going well. But yes, I am still an enthusiastic member, but I really now try and facilitate the contributions of others and get the governance right and those sorts of things.
And Lynn, I'm glad you mentioned the mentoring, because I think that's one of the most important features of being a junior lawyer, and even before that as a law student, finding the right people to listen to so that you can actually then have conversations. And I'm a big believer in reverse mentoring. So someone like yourself, and in this entire generation coming through law school now, has so much to offer. And if we can convince those who are already in practice to listen, you'll have a lot of reverse mentoring going on, and we'll all learn a lot, I'm sure. How do you actually go about finding a mentor and working out whether you're the right fit, and then working that relationship?
Yeah, look, that's a really fantastic question. And I was thinking about mentorship and how much I've taken from the boomers, so-called, when John was speaking. And actually, just a side note to sort of pick up on something that John mentioned, he was talking about working a room and how that skill was very important in his day. I think it's a great example of how, things that you can learn from John's generation cut through today and can really help you, because we're saturated with digital. So people are used to speaking online, sending text messages and the like. But I actually believe what John was describing before, that skill that he could teach us about working a room, I think that's vitally important. It really sets you apart in all sorts of scenarios. And of course, one that will be on the mind of many of our attendees is, those clerkship functions where you've got to make an impression. So I just wanted to, sorry, I know that's a tangent, but I just wanted to reference what John was saying before. But I guess part of it is luck, but that's going to be a useless answer. So I'll try and think about, well, how some of these relationships have come about for me. I think, to be honest, what I've found is if you are genuinely interested in someone's practice area, and if you put yourself out there, and it requires you to be a bit vulnerable and to approach a conversation sometimes cold, which is not always comfortable. But I think there are a lot of very generous people out there, obviously like yourself, Ann-Maree, and obviously Justin North, who's been a big mentor to me, and people like Matt Bradbury, who and other people in my firm who, when I reached out to them, because I was genuinely interested in what they were doing and just sort of wanted to have a coffee and maybe chat a bit about the legal forecast or something that I might be able to give them as well in terms of a mutual, an exchange of mutual value, those people were always receptive. I can't even recall a time where someone said, look, I don't want to speak to you. Maybe once or twice. I think I obviously won't mention the individuals, but some brilliant people I may have reached out to and they just didn't have time or whatever. But, so I think you've got to be proactive and you've got to trust that these people have have the best interests of the next generation at heart usually. And when you give them an opportunity to explain what they've done, I think it also is valuable for them because they see that you're taking an interest in all of their extraordinary achievements. So I think that's the way you've got to approach it. And you've got to get comfortable with having some of those uncomfortable, cold conversations with people that you admire in the profession and create the links that way. But again, to pick up on what John said, you've got to, I think often it works better in person. I think it works better when you've had maybe you've had a coffee with that individual. And I appreciate, particularly for our colleagues in Melbourne, this is not very helpful advice right now in our current context. But I think, getting on Zoom, I think that's a lot better than the simple LinkedIn message. So I'd encourage people to distinguish, a LinkedIn call, LinkedIn message to some of those more traditional mechanisms where you get the rapport building from the get-go because you can see each other and have a proper human interaction. So.
Do you mind if I add something to this?
Please do, Lucy, chime in.
I probably get several messages a week asking for people to catch up with me. You probably do the same, and maybe you do too, John, especially if you have a lot of involvement with juniors. And I think that if you're reaching out to somebody who you don't know and who you haven't met, you don't already have an existing relationship with, I think it's really important that you're aware of how much time the people who you're reaching out to may already be spending on providing resources for you. Like the legal forecast have all sorts of free resources available for you to go and look at that would help perhaps with some of the types of questions that you might be asking. So I think it's important to first be aware of what those materials are, so that it's obvious to the person you're asking that you're not just looking for a shortcut. You don't just want them to give you all the answers and that you've actually done some thinking yourself. And the second thing is to be specific in what it is that you're after. Because a lot of the time I receive messages that are, "Hi Lucy, I'd really like to meet up with you for a coffee," which is great. It's lovely. And don't get me wrong, I love it when people reach out to me and we make a new connection. That's brilliant. But I don't have time to have coffee with every single person who asks me. But if I do, that's the difference, Lucy.
You don't
have 2 young kids. But if you tell us what you want, if you tell us what you're trying to achieve, what's your objective? What is it? Why me? Why Milan? Why John? Why Ann-Maree? It's much more personal, and it's clearer to me what it is that you think I can help you with, and I can work out if I think I'm the right person before we actually get started. I just think all of this comes to being conscious that and aware of the value of time, because that really is the most important asset, not whether we're charging for it by 60 units.
Lucy, to build off that, and Ann-Maree, if you don't mind, to continue down this track, and I know that you've got a networking panel at the same time tomorrow, so if anyone's interested, they should go along to the College of Law's networking panel tomorrow as part of this program. But I also wanted to mention Vertica, who I'm going to consistently embarrass, who's an attendee right now. She was actually my mentee in TLF Connect, which is the Legal Forecast digital mentoring program. And when we sat down and we actually asked this question, we said, well, how do we ensure that when she reaches out to someone she wants to learn from and potentially be mentored by, how can we ensure that it's a valuable transaction? And that probably transaction is the wrong word, actually, but how can we ensure that there's some mutual value there? So it isn't a waste of that person's time, so that they're not really resenting the fact that you've taken them aside on a day where you've basically come unprepared and you've got nothing to offer. And the way that Vertica managed this, was very smart. And Vertica's probably sitting there thinking, but Milan, I think it was your idea. But it was to go and actually do Q&As with some leading people like Hilary Goodyear, former Innovator of the Year, who ran the legal ops, pretty sure the legal ops, sorry Vertica if I've got that wrong, at Herbert Smith Freehills. She actually reached out to these individuals to say, look, what I'm proposing first up is I have a mandate from the Legal Forecast to profile people on their Q&A, on their blog, to learn more about what you've actually achieved and how you think and what your insights are, what your journey is. That's going to hopefully move your career forward in some small way, because we'll get the word out about the excellent stuff you've done. And that became the beginning of a relationship. So instead of going in with an ask, she went in with a give. And then, that has organically now evolved into, well, they obviously have time to speak to her on a more personal level about her aspirations. So that's maybe an example for people. And we're certainly looking for people to write on our blog. Not that I want to turn the 91 participants here into writers for the Legal Forecast, but reach out.
And it's all about collaboration, isn't it? How can we help you so that I can help myself? And yes, I think it's great advice. Great advice from both of you. Now, I don't want to leave everyone with the thought that no one wants to practice law, Milan. So can I just ask you, you're a construction litigator. Have you loved that part of the law? Have you loved being a lawyer?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And you only got the top end of, or the beginning of my story when I said I came to law. But the reason why that I set all of that up, when I said that I came to law without necessarily wanting to do it, but the reason why I set that up is because anyone who knows me knows that I love the law and that I totally abandoned my creative ambitions, maybe for the better. And I have now, my film ambitions. I'm still getting to do a lot of creative work, I should say. But I really have had the most extraordinary opportunities at McCullough Robertson, and as Ann-Maree and the panelists know, I'm actually moving on from the firm this week on a leave of absence on very good terms. I have nothing but good things to say about them. But just to give you an example of some of the opportunities I've gotten through that black letter legal training, I got put onto a big arbitration case for an automated logistics facility. It was sort of a blend between a technology and a construction dispute. And I won't go any further. And what happened at a certain point in the matter was that my senior associate, who's a wonderful individual, she unfortunately had to undergo some heart surgery, which left us in a situation where somebody needed to step up in order to continue to keep the file rolling while she was absent. But it also created a situation whereby when there was an opportunity to go to another country, so Europe in fact, and to take the primary witness statements in the matter, I was the obvious choice in my sort of first year of coming out the gates in terms of being admitted to practice. So, it's probably some extraordinary luck there working on my side, but it was also a result of the fact that I put my head down and I really took an interest in the black letter legal side of my career. And, that actually paid huge dividends because I had this opportunity to go overseas and to do some really awesome work taking evidence overseas, and then see the arbitration right through to its completion very recently. And that's going to be an opportunity, or that process of learning about how you forensically analyze evidence, and how you present arguments, and how you work the procedure of a dispute forum like arbitration. All of that stuff is going to be pretty much the essential foundation for me moving forward in wherever I go next.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you're going to say, well, you have said serendipity as part of your career path to this point, and that's all well and good, but I think all three of you are the types who put your hand up and say, I'll give it a go. Is that right? Have I got that right? That you're not scared, you'll say to yourself, what could go wrong here?
I have a little bit of a reflection on this exact point, because I've been thinking about it recently. So for those who don't know, so I'm leaving McCullough Robertson. I'm starting a new role on Monday at a company called DMTC Limited. I'm joining that company in a dual role like I've occupied at McCullough. So at McCullough, I'm both a lawyer and I'm the firm's innovation ambassador. At this new organization, which is in defense and national security technology, I am going to be a manager of innovation capability, as well as a senior legal counsel in the in-house team. But I was thinking about how everything sort of came to this point that I could sort of get an opportunity like that. And really it comes back to a lot of things that I did when at the time, like we've discussed, people said, well, why are you doing that? It doesn't immediately seem to have a tangible outcome attached to it. Why are you starting the legal forecast? Where does this really go? What is really the play there? And there wasn't a play. Ultimately I tried to put my best foot forward in things that I was passionate about, and I explored them with some very intelligent colleagues, and we created some value for people and tried to take that as far as we could, and then it naturally turned into doors opening. So I don't think you always need a master plan, is what I'm saying. You know, it may feel like serendipity now, but the truth is we were just getting involved in things that we were very interested in and following them through without necessarily scrutinizing everything and asking, well, what's the master plan here? What's the immediate benefit to me? So I'd encourage people to have that approach, you know, particularly when they can afford to have that approach, because I think when you have family and other important responsibilities in life, you may not be able to open every single door that appears, but certainly for a time that's what I was doing, and it just paid huge dividends, even though I didn't know where it would ultimately take me.
And I think too, Milan, a lot of graduates now come out with a dual discipline, some even 2 and 3 different strings to their bow. But many of us have a passion which we don't ever think could be used professionally. So you might be a musician, you might be an artist, you might be a budding author, you might be a podcaster, you might just be someone who loves to talk to people. How can you use those skills and those passions in pursuit of your employment? How can you make it pay?
Well, that's a very good question. I think first of all, you just need to have that inner trust that nothing is wasted, that everything ultimately comes back around. You know, for me in film, it was, you know, the ability to talk to actors and to tell a story and to understand the importance of timing and teamwork and all kinds of things that then became the reason why partners would trust me in those situations, like when I went abroad to take evidence, where they were happy to see me in a room with clients and they know that, and they could kind of trust that I would have that EQ, I guess, or that ability to talk to a client and listen to them, etc. So I think first of all, you got to trust that it will help you in some way, even if it's not you know, something that you monetize as a side hustle where, you know, you're doing some wonderful parallel career. So that would be my first point, that try and have a more philosophical view about how those skills are coming back to assist you in any event. And then the second thing I would say is, and obviously, you know, John mentioned this earlier, and Lucy is a phenomenal example of this. But, you know, there are, and obviously I'm an example of it as well, but there's an increasing emphasis now, not on the lawyer, but on, of course, the client and the colleague across the boardroom in the different sector, be that accounting, as we were discussing, or in other areas. And a massive part of your ability to be an effective lawyer, I think, is to be able to understand the kind of desires, the problems, identify the needs of people who are in industry. And that's where that second degree is so valuable, and that other pursuit can be so valuable as well. And then the final and third point I'd make is, you know, if you are that person who has a thirst to write a book or to do something like that, I think you can manage those things. And I think you can set boundaries, and you can use the sort of shift in tide at the moment in the way that law firm workplaces are going, to carve out some space for yourself during your career and to have that conversation early and set those boundaries about, you know, I also want to pursue this passion. And in my view, that makes you a more interesting candidate. And if firms are not sort of attuned to that, then that's sort of their loss. But what I would say is, you do obviously need to put the hard work in, gain the credit, gain the trust of your mentors and your supervisors before you can have those conversations. But you must have them, and they'll no doubt be critical to your satisfaction in the legal profession.
Great advice, Milan. I don't know how our audience feels, but I'm just exhausted listening to all three of you. You're incredibly creative, you're ambitious, and you seem to be achieving more than humans are supposed to achieve. I know that some of the audience are asking, how do you achieve balance? Or do you think you have achieved balance? Lucy, I might throw to you, because someone's actually aimed this question right at you. How do you achieve balance?
Yeah, I just threw some comments in the chat, but it is definitely happy to talk about it here. I think the variety of my roles is really important for me in achieving some kind of balance in what I do. I really thrive on the variety. So being able to be writing a book today and on this webinar today, and then tomorrow sitting in front of a client, and then perhaps later in the day I'm running a training session for our new junior lawyers. It's the variety that really kind of motivates me and gives me energy to push on and do all of the things. But I think in terms of part of that is knowing what your strengths are, knowing what your interests are, and being okay with with those things. We don't have to, I know you say we're all doing a lot, and yes, we are, but there's also a lot of things I don't do, or opportunities that come my way that I say no to because they might not fit with my goals, or it might not be something I really think I'm that good at or I enjoy that much. So I think being really clear on what your purpose is, where you're headed with your career, and how you want to spend your time, that makes the balance question easier.
And I think Milan used the word boundary, which is incredibly important, that we know what our own boundaries are, and then how to speak to those, being brave, speak to those, to our employers, and say, this is what I need to, I need to remain resilient in my job so you get the best out of me. But this is the boundary to which I can work. John, could I throw to you, because at the other end of your fabulous career now, you could probably tell us how you've survived and thrived all these years in legal practice.
Well, we belong to that generation that put in the big hours, so all the smart leveraging of human intelligence through IT wasn't available, and it was the grind. So, I mean, even though I began to change it in my own practice, I had to live through 10 years of conventional legal practice. During that period, I was an aspiring athlete. I wanted to run for my country. And at 5 o'clock, I would waltz out with my kit bag and go to the athletic track and jump over hurdles. You can imagine how that went down when all the young associates are trying to get the boss's attention by staying through till 10 o'clock at night. Well, I was out of there at 5 because I had to be on track. And so, I had interests that were outside the law. And also, so the first thing is the diversity that Lucy's spoken about, and to not lose the things outside the law, which have got nothing to do with all the wonderful things I'm hearing Milan and Lucy say today, and you've alluded to, Ann-Maree. So for me, sport was a complete other alternative in terms of energy and so forth. So that's the one thing. The second thing is being balanced with your relationships. I mean, all of this is about dealing with people, and this is a very sensitive world we live in these days. And so you've got to be very conscious, especially the cross-generational conversation needs to be sensitive to people's sensibilities about what they're trying to do. So if you're going to be a lawyer, you have to be a psychologist of some degree to understand the impact of what you're doing is having on them, and finding things that they're interested in doing with you. So people skills, and I'm sure that there's lots of places to develop people skills other than in law firms, for heaven's sake. So I certainly learned it in a busy 70s where I spent doing athletics. And just now I'm finally getting into sports law, and with some of the community sports issues that cross over with intellectual property. Finally, Milan and Lucy, you may be aware that sport is now a recognised governance, and we have two major sports organisations, the Australian Sports Commission, which is now asking for governance help. They're having community engagement with community sport, trying to understand how governance fits into sporting communities. And finally, we've got another group called the Sports Integrity Unit, which is looking at things like the emergence of women's sport and the fact that the gals are taking the exact same risks and working just as hard, but get paid a pittance of what the men are getting paid. So those issues are being looked at from a governance point of view. I'm very envious of the young lawyers that may be listening to this and what they're about to step out to. Lucy's an extraordinary example of that. And Milan, it's the world's your oyster, guys. I mean, as long as you recognise that you are running a career, and if you're going to be a successful lawyer, you have to be a careerist. And that's a whole different set of podcasts. And I feel privileged to be sitting at a table, firstly with Ann-Maree, who herself has transformed legal education in Queensland, if not the nation, to hear about Lucy's extraordinary contribution to her firm and all the things she's doing, including kids. And Milan's about to go to his third capital city in as many years, after starting in Brisbane, off to Sydney and soon to Melbourne. If you're going to be a lawyer and you're going to maximise your impact as a lawyer, you have to think about this in terms of careerism. And I won't even start that conversation here, because there's examples of magnificent careerism in just being at shoulder to shoulder with my co-panelists. But if you're a young lawyer, you've got to think for yourself, and you've got to work out what you can do and what works, and that's where the balance issues come in. So I'm quite envious of the people who are listening to this. My career is largely on the slowdown now, as I live in my rainforest on an island with its own language. But there was a time, and we recognised in the intellectual property community, we recognised Perth. Perth is the only other state apart from Queensland that has an intellectual property subcommittee. And as Ann-Maree knows, that subcommittee has been leveraged at the Law Society into innovation within the law. So finally, they're appointing lawyers to work for the society to transform the profession. This is a crazy time. These are marvellous things that are happening, far better than the calcified 19th century value systems that I inherited in the mid-70s. So I am envious of young lawyers. Everything is possible as long as you are resilient and innovative and courageous.
They are wonderful, wonderful parting words, John. I have to ask you, if I may steal the microphone now and ask our remaining panellists what their advice to today's law students and law graduates is. If they were back there with them, what would they tell them today, knowing what they've learned along their career paths? Lucy, would you like to take that one first?
I wasn't prepared for this one. But the thing that comes to mind, and it's drawing on exactly what John just said, is you don't give up on or to continue to explore your interests outside of law, because every time I have done that, it has benefited my firm and my career and my business in ways I could never have even imagined. And I'll give you an example of that. After I had my daughter, I started a mum blog where I would write about motherhood, basically, because motherhood was quite a challenge for me when at the beginning, and I just wanted to connect with people. And so I started a blog where I wrote about motherhood, and I learned how to use WordPress, how to build websites, how to do social media marketing, because I had to share this blog with the world. And all of those things fed back into my firm, and it led to us building about 5 different websites for all the different brands that our firm offers, and for us to understand that we needed to start doing more content marketing. And it just went on and on and on. And that's just one example. I could share so many more of things that I would originally think have absolutely nothing to do with the practice of law or even the business of law, and then they do. So I guess that would be my advice. Keep learning and don't focus your learning just on law.
Lovely, great advice. And Milan, our birthday boy, can I ask you what you would tell yourself way back in 3rd, 4th year uni, first coming out and starting as a fresh graduate?
I was saying it was rather recently, and thank you for the birthday wishes. I've gotten so many birthday wishes in the group chat. I've just recognised those. Thank you.
You're amongst friends here, Milan.
Yeah. I have 2 pieces of advice, and I'll play off Lucy a bit, and I'll look at she sort of said, look, cultivate those interests outside of law. I agree with that. When you are doing, well, whatever you're doing, whatever you're pursuing, be it the clerkship, be it whatever, the rest of your degree, my advice is to really try and take an interest in stuff that may seem boring that you have in front of you right now. My advice is, look, if you get stuck with the boring review task where you've just got to, pick out the spelling mistakes in a 200-page, submission document, get into that stuff, do it enthusiastically, do the boring stuff enthusiastically. That's a tangible way of really demonstrating a skill that a lot of law firms don't put into words properly, but what they're really effectively looking for, which is that you're willing to be a part of the team and then be patient about getting those greater opportunities in the future. So that would be my first thing. Do the boring stuff as well as you can and see it as an opportunity. And then my second piece of advice would be, I understand it's just a really tough time for a lot of people here in terms of opportunities and the uncertainty in the market and different things like that. And I know it's not possible for everyone because people have different pressures on them, but to the extent that you can take this opportunity to revisit some of the really important things that you might not have time for when your career does inevitably take off, like family and yourself and other things that may be important to you that aren't necessarily about your career, I would provide you with this call to action to take that stuff and run with it now while you can, because your career will take off and then you won't have the time. So try and see the silver lining in things would be my other piece of advice.
Fabulous, thank you. Sadly, it has come time to call this to an end. Can I tell everyone, all our many members of the audience and all of my colleagues at the College of Law, how privileged we are to have such talented lawyers give their time, especially on their birthdays and after hours, and all the way from Norfolk Island, to give their time to us and to be so generous with their advice. May I, on your behalf, thank John Kenny, Lucy Dickens and Milan Gandhi for everything you've given us tonight, your inspiration and your collaboration, telling us that we can reach out. I can see that in the chat context here, saying to everyone, reach out, find me on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect. Honestly, this is the profession you're coming into. I don't think it gets better than this. So do be inspired and do chase down your dreams. There is a legal career in all of us, whether it's conventional or otherwise, but you can make it your own. So let me close with that. Thank you for being part of the 2020 College of Law Admission to Practice Academy. There is plenty more where this came from all week. So make sure you hop on, take the advice that's being given and run with it. And we look forward to having you, our audience, as our panel members in future academies right here with us at the College of Law. Thank you. Good night, everyone. And as I say, it's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night now.
Thank you.